Today we're going to compare two of my favorite weapons ever, the Roman Gladius and the Japanese Katana. Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. So I have decided to start this new series again. I've been starting a lot of new series lately. Yeah, I'm very active. So I'd like to start this new series about a comparative weaponry and then comparative sets of armor. And the thing is that yes, yesterday and the day before I made videos about Japanese folklore, and I will continue those series as well, don't worry. But I just want to alternate on my channel between cultural videos, literary videos, linguistic videos, gaming videos, and weapons and armor videos. So today we're going to focus on this, Gladius versus Katana. Now, we're going to try to consider as much as we can. We will try to be as scientific as we can and as impartial as we can about these two weapons, and trying to see pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. But first of all, of course, right off the bat, I think the first thing we can say is that clearly Katana's got a reach advantage. But has it really? Well, you see, I know that some people out there will be like, this video makes no sense, Katana would win 100 times. But no, I don't think it's that easy to assess. First of all, let's compare the length of these weapons. Now, the Gladius, yes, people call it a short sword. Thing is, though, that it's not short. I mean, it is shorter, I'll give you that. But look at this beast. I mean, the blade is long. I mean, this is a beast of a blade. And at the time, most countries would have blades of this length anyways, like if we consider the Greeks, if we consider Egyptian swords. I mean, at the time, swords were this length. So the Gladius is not, and there are other Gladius which are actually longer than this. This is a Mainz Gladius. So today we will use a Mainz Gladius as a term, as a term of comparison. But of course, there is the Pompeii Gladius, which, yes, it is shorter, but it's also thinner. Okay, and there are other kinds of Gladius, not even mentioning the Spatha, but that's a different weapon. So the real difference in length, if you ask me, is the handle. Because if you look at the handle, Katana's handles are normally twice as big or twice as long as a Gladius handle. And that's because the Katana is mostly used two-handed. It can be used one-handed, but it's mostly used and operated two-handed. But the blade, the difference between in reach between these two weapons is not that big as one would imagine. This much, pretty much. So it's not like the way people say it, it sounds like it's the difference between a polearm and a dagger. It's not. So yes, I suppose that with a katana you would have a slight reach advantage over a Gladius, but there are other factors we need to keep into consideration if we want to compare these weapons. First of all, the Gladius is mainly a stabbing or thrusting weapon, although, as I have mentioned in my historical street vlogger video, when I was talking a little bit with my friend Salvo about these weapons, because he also has a lot of passion for Roman history and that sort of martial arts, including Japanese martial arts. The Gladius is optimized for thrusting, but it can cut, and it was used for cutting because there are mentions of Roman soldiers actually dismembering their opponents, and the only way to dismember an opponent is and disembowel them, and the only way to do that is through slashing motions, and cutting is not through you don't cut an arm off a person through thrusting. However, it's mainly a thrusting weapon. With a katana, and sorry for this katana, it's cheap, I know. I've been trying to buy myself a good katana, but unfortunately some shops will just don't send to Italy. So we'll have to do with this cheap katana for now. But it does give us an idea. With the katana, it's the exact opposite situation, meaning that a katana is mainly a slashing weapon. It's an implement of combat which is mostly optimized for cutting, but you can thrust with a katana. Yes, it is slightly curved. In fact, if you look at how many Koryu styles thrust, you can thrust with the katana, with the point upward, but I noticed a lot of kata represented with the katana hold the other way around when thrusting, just like in this clip here that we can appreciate together. So basically like this, the opposite way, and I think it does make sense. So yeah, the katana can thrust, but it's not optimized for thrusting, shall we say. And even in kendo and kenjutsu, there is a thrust to the throat, and in kendo there used to be thrust to the body as well. So another question we should ask is, what's the nature of these weapons? Well, the katana was a backup weapon. The katana was not a battlefield weapon. The Gladius, on the other hand, is a battlefield weapon. So already we see a big difference here. And I'm not saying that the Gladius is better than a katana because of this, but I'm just saying these populations and these civilizations have invented these and implements for specific reasons. And again, the katana was not the main battlefield weapon of samurai. The main battlefield weapon of samurai were naginata, yari, and bows. And then Tanegashima Teppo, of course, when gunpowder is introduced in Japan. But the Romans, they did stick with the Gladius for lots of time. I mean, talking centuries. So it was a battlefield weapon, which was the main weapon of a Roman throughout the entire history of the Romans anyways. Regnum Romanum, so the Roman kingdom. Res Publica, so the republic. Imperium, the empire. It is in post-imperial times that they actually switched to a longer one, the Spatha, as I have mentioned in the video, Spatha versus Gladius. But this was the main battlefield weapon of the Romans, so it worked on the battlefield. So of course we are considering different times, because at the times of the Romans the katana didn't exist. So we're talking about a weapon put together or compared with a weapon that is from a different time, where war was different, where tactics were different. So of course there are a lot of factors that play that need to be taken into consideration. But I'm just saying, if we could take two people, okay, we take a Japanese samurai and we take a Roman legionary, and for some reasons we create this warp in time, and they meet, okay, and they have equal levels of training, equal levels of experience in battle. You give the samurai the katana, no armor. You give the Roman the gladius, no armor. Who's gonna win? So completely hypothetical situation, but although it's very difficult to say, I think ultimately the fighter who wins is the best fighter, of course, but in our hypothetical situation, we're just going to consider the pros and cons of this choice of weapon. Well, first of all, it's true that the Gladius is a battlefield weapon, so it does have a slight advantage over the katana, if you ask me, because of that. But there's a huge however here that we need to consider. The Gladius was always used in combination with the scutum, this beast here. So, and by the way, no Romans would hold the scutum with the right hand and use the gladius with the left hand. Even if they were left-handed, they were forced to use the gladius with the right hand. I'm just saying. This is why, for example, in Italian, to say left, we say sinistra. Now in English, what's the closest word to that? Sinister, with a negative meaning. I think you can imagine why. The Romans didn't really appreciate left-handed people. So the gladius is complementary to the scutum, and the scutum is complementary to the gladius. So I think what's key to say is that if you had a duel, again, between a samurai wielding a katana and a Roman legionary wielding a gladius, then much will depend if the Roman legionary has a scutum. Because if the Roman legionary doesn't have a scutum, I'd say that the samurai has an advantage. But if the Roman legionary has a scutum, then the situation might be opposite. Because I have tried sparring with my friends. When you wield a katana, it's very difficult to go past the scutum. And yes, you can keep him at a distance, but it will close in eventually. And if he does close in, it's really difficult because he's going to start stabbing like crazy, and while you're trying to bypass the scutum, because the katana for you is the implement of both offense and defense, but the katana is not very effective as far as the defense is concerned. Neither is the gladius, because they both have a very small guard, but the gladius is relying on the scutum, the katana is relying on what? Armor, of course, but in non-unarmored situations that is a disadvantage. Now, outside of a duel situation, if we consider this to be a challenge on a battlefield, then the situation will be completely different. Why? Because samurai were mounted units. So we're talking about probably mounted archers shooting at Roman legionaries, and that could be problematic. Although, I'm going to say, the Romans do have an answer to missile fire, and that is the testudo. So it's not like, samurai would have an easy time shooting them down. But again, that is too much of a wide situation, because we should be considering samurai from what era, because if we consider Japanese warriors of the same time as the Romans, then they were not samurai. But in that situation, then I would say a Roman legion would cut into pieces any Japanese army of the same time period, simply because the Romans had a lot more experience in fighting people of diverse ethnicity and diverse cultures and diverse approaches to war. The Japanese only fought against themselves, and at that time the sort of weapon and armory that they were using was absolutely a joke compared to what the Romans had. But if we go into samurai era, then it's a completely different kettle of fish. And of course, that would be a technological difference between Romans and Roman army, that even if you consider the latest Roman army, if we consider the standard and most famous Imperial Roman army, then it would be problematic, I think, for the Romans. They would have to adapt to new warfare, because the samurai are on horseback, and we do know what happened during the Second Punic War, when the Romans had to go against heavily mounted opponents, considering Hannibal. So in that case, the Romans would have to adapt, because if they keep fighting the way they fight, the Japanese might have an advantage. Also, the Japanese would use pole weapons, and the Romans wouldn't, because they would be using these. Yeah, they would throw the pila, I suppose, but problematic, I would say. I would give an advantage to the Japanese in that case. But of course, again, there are quite a few centuries of development in warfare that the Romans wouldn't have had. So of course, this is a completely hypothetical situation, which doesn't really... It was just to finish up the concept. So some people might even ask, so why a samurai who's the elite top fighter against a legionary? Why not against a centurion? I think that's it doesn't make sense. This wouldn't make sense. If you ask me, I think a Roman legionary, I would say that most Roman legionaries would be stronger than centurions. Like, some people think that, a centurion is a stronger legionary. No, a centurion is a Roman military officer who is in command of a centuria, so 80 men. It doesn't mean that he's stronger, as a matter of... And yes, centurions did participate in fighting actively, so they were in the midst of the unit and they were facing their opponents, so they had just as much experience as any legionary would have. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't find many legionaries who were fitter, tougher and stronger than centurions. Centurions were not chosen only for how good they were fighting, but they were mostly chosen for their ability to command. So I'd say that it would be rather feasible to think that that a centurion might be stronger and a better fighter than some legionaries, but there would definitely be some other legionaries, like veterans and people who were more experienced, who would destroy into pieces any centurion if they were to fight. Of course they didn't, but I'm just saying. And even going all the way up to the legatus, the general, probably the general was the weaker of all, because yes, generals did go to war and they did participate, but you wouldn't risk your general against your foes. If you did manage, the general was supposed to give commands. So if you did manage, if an enemy units of the Gauls, for example, managed to reach the Roman general, which would be a huge mess up for the Roman army. But if that did happen, the general would still have his closest soldiers fight for him. So if the general had to fight, which he did, I'm sure it happened historically speaking, but if he had to fight, it would be a very dangerous position for the Romans, because you don't want to lose a general or a legatus in battle. So generals could fight, generals were trained, generals had armor, but they had and the best armor, of course, and the best weapons you can have, so that would give them a good edge in a fight. But as far as fighting skills, they had a lot less experience than their centurions and a lot less experience than their legionaries. So I would say that a Roman legionary is an absolutely valid choice to face a elite warrior of the elite class in Japan. Reiterate, if we consider a Roman soldier with his scutum and with his gladius against a Japanese samurai only armed with a katana, I would give the edge to the Roman soldier. However, if we consider a samurai using a naginata or pole weapons or even a bow against a Roman soldier, then the situation evens up, and perhaps it would even go in favor of the samurai. And if you remove the scutum from the Roman legionary, he probably wouldn't stand a chance against the samurai. This is what I think. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. I thank you for your time. Let me know if you like this series. As always, I am wanting to do this series, but it all depends on whether you like it or not. If you like this idea, next time I think I would compare Roman armor against samurai armor, and then we will continue with many other weapons. We could even compare the Yumi and the longbow, the English longbow. Many other things we can compare. Let me know in the comments below. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Sayonara. Walete.